Picture this, it's 1954. The world is basically split right down the middle by the Cold War. Trust? It's completely gone. Every single border is a potential flashpoint. And it's in this incredibly tense atmosphere that a single American plane is going to spark an incident that goes all the way to the world's highest court.
So, what does happen when a U.S. plane goes down behind the Iron Curtain? This isn't just some hypothetical question. It's the absolute heart of a real-life international legal drama, a case that would push the very limits of global justice when faced with the iron will of two powerful nations.
So where does this whole story begin? Well, it doesn't start in a stuffy courtroom. It starts in the tense skies over Eastern Europe, where the Cold War was at its most fragile. Okay, so get this. November 19, 1951. A U.S. military flight, crew and all, suddenly finds itself on the ground in Hungary, deep behind the Iron Curtain. And the crew? They're immediately detained. Now, for the United States, this is a clear-cut case of illegal detention. But for Hungary and its powerful ally, the Soviet Union, it's a violation of their airspace. For years, diplomatic channels lead absolutely nowhere. The crew's eventually released, but the plane, and the principle of the whole thing, that remains a huge unresolved issue.
So, after more than 2 years of this stalemate, Washington decides to change tactics. They figure, if talking won't work, maybe the law will. So they make a really bold move and decide to take their fight to the International Court of Justice. And boom, here it is. This is the moment it all becomes official. This letter from the American ambassador to the court is what formally kicks off the whole proceeding. But wait a minute, notice something really interesting here. The U.S. isn't just suing one country. No, they filed two separate cases on the very same day. One is aimed directly at Hungary, that's where the plane landed, but the other one is aimed squarely at the regional superpower, the USSR. The U.S. is basically arguing that both of them are on the hook for the damages and for illegally holding the crew. And from here, the ball gets rolling really fast. The U.S. files in early March. By the end of April, the Soviet Union has already sent its reply. Hungary follows up in mid-June. And then, just a month after that, the court issues its final judgment. The stage is set for a massive legal showdown. All right, so the first response comes from Moscow, and you can bet the whole world is holding its breath. Is the Soviet Union actually going to show up and argue its case on the world stage? Well, the answer arrives, and it is very, very direct. And this is it, the actual letter. It's addressed to the court, and its message couldn't be clearer. The language is all very formal and diplomatic, but the meaning behind it, it's a hard, unyielding no. This is the killer line right here. The USSR deems unacceptable the whole idea of this case going before the court. It's not just that they won't participate, they are fundamentally rejecting the court's right to even be involved. No debate, no legal arguments, just nope. So, with the Soviets out, all eyes turn to Budapest. Maybe Hungary, the smaller nation where it all happened, might be willing to play ball with the court. Well, sure enough, about 6 weeks after the Soviets responded, this letter shows up from the Hungarian government. But if the U.S. was hoping for better news, they were about to be disappointed. You guessed it, Hungary's position is pretty much a carbon copy. They are not in a position to submit to the court's jurisdiction. They are totally echoing the Soviet refusal, presenting this united front of defiance. And here's their justification. Hungary argues that this whole thing, an unauthorized plane in their airspace, is a criminal matter that belongs entirely to their own national courts. They say it falls under their national competence, which is really just a fancy way of saying it's their business and their business alone. In their view, this isn't an international dispute at all. So now, the International Court of Justice is in a really, really tough spot. The plaintiff, the United States, is there, ready to argue its case. But both defendants, Hungary and the USSR, have refused to even show up to the party. I mean, this is the fundamental challenge, right? The court's authority doesn't come from an army or a police force. It's based entirely on the consent of nations to participate. So what happens when that consent is just withheld? On July 12th, the court gives its answer. This document has the final order, which is a procedural decision that basically ends the entire thing. It's not a ruling on who was right or wrong, but a ruling on whether a case could even exist in the first place. The court's order was to have the case removed from the list. It's the official legal term for just closing the file. And this gets to the heart of the matter. The International Court of Justice can only hear a case if both parties agree to its jurisdiction. Since Hungary and the USSR refused to consent, the court's hands were completely tied. Legally, it had no power to do anything.
And just like that, it was over. The American legal challenge launched with all this formal paperwork and diplomatic weight just evaporated. It was stopped cold by the simple, powerful act of two nations refusing to participate, putting their national sovereignty above the authority of an international court.
And this leaves us with a huge question, one that's just as relevant today as it was at the height of the Cold War. What is the power of a global court when nations can just refuse to listen? This 1954 case is a perfect snapshot of that fundamental tension between the dream of international law and the reality of national power. It's a reminder that the biggest challenge for any global institution isn't just making the right ruling, but actually getting the world's powers to show up and listen in the first place.